a pendulum that day, and she was practicing with it, and she was doing as best she could, but she had no experience with it. And they said, Dan, you need to come up here. So I'm up there, and I didn't have my pendulum with me that day because I hadn't planned on doing any dowsing. So the lady next to me had a rather heavy necklace. It was a cross, as a matter of fact. I said, may I borrow your necklace? So she took her necklace off, and that became my pendulum. It was a weight on a string. And so I started working. I said, sure enough, there are spirits here. I looked at Dwight. I said, Dwight, you need to come up here and direct this thing. And you ask the questions, and I'll provide the answers with the pendulum. So Dwight comes up, and he's doing the investigating, and I'm providing the answers through my pendulum work. And then we realized we're into something pretty heavy, and said, we need Rhonda up here. So we called Rhonda, come on up here. And she was already tearing up as she walked up. I said, we're into something really heavy here. So the film crew is they're from New York, and they're kind of watching this with skeptical eyes. And the people around us kind of backed away to give us room, and the people sitting in the audience just kind of sat there and observed, leaning forward, saying, what's going on here? And what we discovered, that we had made contact with a murderer, a Chinese murderer, a killer.
Oh,
he had committed murder.
I mean, was he Chinese killing people, or was he killing Chinese? Okay.
He was Chinese, and this gets real interesting. There were two spirits there at that time. There was the murderer, and there was the murder victim.
Oh, wow.
Now, the murderer was terrified. He was a trapped spirit. He was afraid of crossing over, going into the light, however you want to describe it, because he was afraid of what was going to happen to him. And his victim had crossed over and had come back and was telling his killer, he said, look, all is forgiven. Everything is okay. It's a little bit different over there. There's nothing for you to be afraid of. So what you had going on at that time was you had me, Dwight, and Rhonda, and the murder victim trying to convince this killer that it was okay for him to cross over and go into the light.
So the victim was actually had no grudges against the guy that killed him.
No, he said, I think the phrase was, all is forgiven, And he had come back to help bring this guy over, get him into a better life, because the guy was living on this plane terrified. And the guy had come back to say, come on over, everything is okay. So we're working with him, and there came a point, I don't remember this, but Brian says the pendulum spun around my finger, and I remember it dropped out of my hand, and I said, he's gone. And there was a wave of emotion that swept through everybody at that instant in that building. I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house. I mean, you had about 35 people either sniffing, and some were weeping openly. And, Rhonda and I just hugged, and, it's wonderful. We were just teared up. It was that powerful. It's the most powerful emotional thing that's happened to me since I've been doing this. Oh, and everybody felt it.
Yeah. How long a time period were you there with the murder?
That was probably, I'm guessing, no more than half an hour, and probably much less than that. I would say 15 or 20 minutes.
That's one thing I always wonder, somebody who didn't go into the light or gone to, the next realm or what dimension or something. I wonder, what it's like for them to be stuck, in that location, like forever type of feeling.
Yeah, and we don't have really answers. Part of what we're doing in the next series of books, we've already finished book 2. And we're thinking about book 3, but we're already thinking down the road. And one of the books we want to explore, if we can get enough contact, is to find out, what is it like over there? What happens when you cross over? So far, what we've discovered, and this is pretty much just from what we've gained in conversations. We weren't actually trying to figure out at the time what it was like, but once you cross over, there are lots of options. We've encountered people who crossed over and who have decided to, at least at some level, come back over this side. We've run into a lot of spirits who were in different places that we've investigated, and we said, you crossed over. Why are you back here? And the answer is, we like it. We like it here. We had a good time here. This is where we had fun. This is where my family was.
They don't want to give up. You know,
yeah. But I mean, they have the choice. I mean, they can. We've discovered they can come. They can go back and forth.
You know, you remember the old Art Bell show? He had John Lear was on his show one time, and John Lear kept telling Art Bell, you know, when you die or if you have a near-death experience, don't go towards the light. The light is a trick. You want to go towards darkness. And you know, it seemed like for years I actually was a distant friend of Art Bell. And, you know, it really bugged Art Bell a lot because he kept saying, you know, on air, and even to me, he even said it a couple of times. He goes, you know, when I pass on, I don't know which way to go now. Do I go to the light, or do I go to the darkness? Because the light could be a trick, it's from the devil, basically, from Satan. And, you know, he had a good point. John Lear had a real good point when he did it. I mean, it made you think. So I may write a short story about that someday. Some guy just standing there stuck, looking at the dark, looking at the light, looking at the dark, looking at the light. Trying to figure out which one to choose. I mean, that's worse than going into a candy store with, when you're a kid with a dime and try to figure out what piece of candy you can afford. And you stand there for hours. Can you imagine, like, okay, now I want to go to heaven. Yeah. I don't want to go to hell. Yeah, I don't know. I imagine the decision is a lot easier to make than that. But I don't know. Again, that's one of the areas we want to explore. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't want to find out yet for a long time. Oh, yeah, I'm not. When my time comes, I'll be ready to take the next adventure, but I'm not buying my bus ticket yet. That's for sure. So you had this, and after the person evidently went into the light or went to the next... wherever. Crossed over to wherever he went. Poor guy could have maybe went to hell for murder. I don't know. But, apparently not. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I don't think his victim would have come back to say, come over, all is forgiven. I don't. If he was going to go to hell, or that he was trying to get even for Adam too. You got to think about that. That's another short story. Yeah, that could be. Hey, you may be making me some money here. Thank you. Hey, maybe I'll make some money. I'll credit you in the story. Have you gone through and dowsed through like old cemeteries and stuff like that too? Really, only one that I can think of. No, I'll take it back, two. We did one at the old Cortland Cemetery, and we also did one at the old Pinal Cemetery. That's where Wyatt Earp's common-law wife, Mattie Earp, was buried. So we've done two. Primarily, our thinking is, why would you go hang around a graveyard when you could go hang around the saloon? Oh, that's true. If you're a spirit, which would you rather go to? If you're a spirit of a cowboy, would you rather go to where you were buried, or would you rather go to the saloon or the brothel or the church or where your family lives? Oh, wherever you were the most happiest. Yeah, wherever you were the most happy. And so we tend to go towards houses and places where people work. Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, like I was talking to a ghost hunter one time, and they were getting all these recordings, and then at times they would go out, in the cemetery, and they wouldn't get anything. And I said, well, maybe you're asking the wrong questions. And they said, well, Gary, what type of question should have I asked? You should have offered him a cigarette. I mean, then you might say, I'll take one. That's a bad joke, but it's true. I mean, not necessarily. When we go to some Indian sites, that we know of that are, if not sacred, very important, we will leave an offering. An offering of tobacco, just as a sign of courtesy and respect. When we go see Celia Ann Blaylock, that's Mattie Earp. When we go to her grave, we'll leave a little piece of jewelry just to say, thank you for speaking with us. Oh wow! Well, yeah. I think there's nothing mystical about that. It's just it's a matter of courtesy. Yeah. But I think, again, your listeners might find this really interesting. I think one of the reasons we are so successful in our approach is our attitude. When we go into a place of where someone worked, or a place of business, or especially someone's home,
that home might have been a teepee, it might have been a log cabin, an adobe shack, or a hotel or whatever. We go in with the utmost respect, and we go in with courtesy and openness and respect. And we say, if there's anybody here, we would like to be in your space. We hope you welcome us into your space. We would like to talk to you. Would you please speak with us? We do not go in confrontational at all. And I think people on the other side respect that.
I just wonder how many people don't cross over and, are still, like walking around those, old ghost towns, or what the ruins of ghost towns, or the Indian, village used to be.
Mm-hmm. Hard to say. I would even hazard a guess.
Wow. I mean,
and as I say, a lot of them that are wandering around aren't trapped.
So they're making a decision. They don't want to move to the next level. They're enjoying being where they're at.
Again, that's one of the mysteries we're exploring. I think the answer to your question is probably yes on both counts. I think, again, I'm guessing on this part. I'm guessing if you cross over and you want to stay over, you can certainly do that and do whatever it is that you can, whatever your options are from that. But I do know some of your options are, if you're over there, you can come back to a very pleasant place here and spend time here. Maybe that's their vacation over there. We ran into we were at a place called the 96 Ranch. It's an old ghost ranch, and there's still some structures and buildings there. And we went out to the barn, and we're sitting there, and we recorded this. We've got, it's concrete floor, but we've got the sound of footsteps, boots with spurs, walking by on wood. And it has the Doppler effect. It goes from quiet, louder, quite away. And we started, said, well, there's somebody here. So we started asking questions, and we encountered the spirit of a Marine who had died in World War II. He was a ranch hand at the 96 Ranch, and he got married. I think it was in 1939. The war came. He enlisted in the Marines and was killed over in the Pacific on one of the islands. One of those horrible deaths over there. And he crossed over. And what we learned from him, he came back to the 96 Ranch, and the place and the time he came to was his wedding night. So he came back, and it was the best night of his life. He was reliving the best night of his life. He was with the woman he loved. He was with his family and friends. They were having a big dance party. Had the fiddles out, and the banjos out, and the guitars out. They were just having a grand old time, and that's where he came back to.
So in other words, they're coming back, and it's like a recording. They just come back, and it's like replaying over and over again?
Apparently so. Again, you have the option, I think, of staying over or coming back. And something we found out that we really want to study, we were in a ghost a milling town called Sasco. It's north of Tucson. It's a rather substantial ruin. And there's the mill site. I think it was abandoned like at 1910, 1911, somewhere in there. And then there's the town site, which is all ruins there. And then there's an old hotel, which is the walls are still standing. But we were over talking to someone, and we encountered a woman who was there. And we started trying to talk with her. And she was there, the 1890s, somewhere in there. And she had come back just because she had a good experience there. I think she crossed over and came back as a vacation. I don't think she, as a spirit, was actually living there full time, but she was definitely there when we were there. And we asked her, can you come back to any time you want to? And the answer that we got was she could come back to any period in time that she had lived through, any life that she had experienced. Apparently, this gets into reincarnation.
Uh-huh.
So she could come back. I mean, if she lived in 1400, she could go back to that life. If she lived in the 1600s, she could go back to that life. If she lived in 1880, she could go back to that life. But she couldn't go beyond. She couldn't go beyond current time. Now, she could go beyond the 1880s when she died to where we were in our time, but she couldn't go beyond our time. But she could go to any lifetime before that. Well, we found that really interesting, and we want to explore that some more.
That is really, really interesting. That if somebody's been reincarnated 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 times, they can go back and I guess relive maybe other parts of their life over again.